Notice of motion, private business number 13, the Honourable T.A. Franks to move.
The Honourable Tammy Franks has the call.
Thank you, Mr President. I move notice of motion, private business number 13, standing in my name.
Seconded. Seconded. The Honourable Ms Franks.
Thank you, Mr President. This motion notes that this council condemns the inaction of the Minister for the Environment and Water and the Minister for Mineral Resources and Energy in dealing with the Buckland Dry Creek Limited, resulting in the mass die-off of mangroves in St Kilda. Indeed, for many months now, Mr President, the community and damningly the government have known that the St Kilda mangroves are dying. The signs point to the cause of the mass die-off being the refilling of the old gypsum ponds with hypersaline brine at the nearby Dry Creek salt field, which is being managed, of course, by the, and I use the word loosely, managed by the Buckland Dry Creek Company. These ponds have been empty against advice, which I'll get to later, since 2014, when the site ceased operating. As they dried out, their gypsum lining dried too, rotting and cracking and leading to the production of acid. Small amounts of hypersaline water started leaking out of the ponds in early 2020, ramping up in May 2020. Then by July, we start to see sick mangroves and also sick household gardens in the area too. By August, the trees on the common were dead and all the gum trees in the gardens had dropped their leaves. The mangroves were, of course, seriously sick. Then the salt marsh as well started dying. In late September, DEM and DEW and the EPA and the Coastal Protection Board and the mining company came for a visit to the mangroves and found areas of leakage where you could see and hear the brine trickling out of the banks. At that time, you could even see where the acidified brine had reached the surface. Acidified, sorry. So the government had seen for themselves as far as back as September 2020, but those warning signs and the damage had actually been there for longer. In fact, following that time, Geoscience Australia were able to track via aerial imaging the mass die-off occurring over just a few weeks. Yesterday was the 2nd of February 2021. It was World Wetlands Day. Myself and my colleague, the Honourable Mark Parnell, and members of both sides of Parliament, but more notably the Labor side, held a vigil on the steps outside, mourning the destruction and degradation of what we now understand to be about 193 hectares of vegetation. Prior to this, myself and others attended the launch of the new St Kilda Mangrove Alliance. This is a collective of local, national and international organisations and individuals representing the environment, representing industry, science and community. And they've come together to ensure that urgent and best practice action is taken to ensure the recovery and long-term health of this globally significant wetland. The launch of the Alliance had 16 member organisations, and that number is growing. The St Kilda Mangrove Alliance are calling on the Marshall Government to intervene, and they have 4 demands. 1, intervene through the immediate removal of the damaging hypersaline brine in the ponds to the south of St Kilda Road. 2, by providing much greater transparency and a genuine two-way exchange of information between Buckland Dry Creek Limited, the Department for Energy and Mining and the public. 3, the development of a closure and rehabilitation plan in partnership with the public for the damaged ponds and a restoration plan for the surrounding tidal wetlands. And 4, a permanent solution to the unstable holding pattern operating in the northern ponds, preferably the transition of those ponds to self-sustaining natural habitats that do not pose ongoing risk to the surrounding tidal wetlands. The impacts of this die-off are drastic and widespread. Even where the mangroves and salt marsh haven't died yet, the environment is under significant stress. Recent spatial analysis has shown just how big the impact zone is. That is 2.4 hectares of back swamp, 20.5 hectares of chenia and dunes, 12.8 hectares of high salt marsh, 78.7 hectares of mid to low marsh, 78.7 hectares of mangroves and that is a total of 193.1 hectares that are already dead or stressed. The damaged area is actually almost the size of 100 Adelaide ovals. This is not including the further 150 hectares of vegetation that falls in the at risk of declining but not yet enough evidence to attribute category. It's worth noting that the Minister for Environment dismissed this yesterday on ABC Radio, saying, quote, "Perspective is important," end quote, and saying that this is not a huge area of mangroves. And let me be clear, that was in reference to what had been previously understood as the impact area, which is smaller than what we now know to be the case. He was referring to the 10 hectares of mangrove forest and 35 hectares of salt marsh. Even if we didn't now know that the numbers are so much higher or more horrifying, 45 hectares of mangroves and salt marsh can hardly be dismissed, as it was. But that's not all. These leaking salt ponds have killed the gardens of almost half a dozen houses, and the groundwater in the area has been negatively affected, with further impacts likely and far-reaching. This could continue to affect estuaries at Helps Road drainage and the Little Parra River, where native freshwater fish could suffer. Intertidal and shallow subtidal seagrass and sand habitats around the area support at least 56 species of fish and invertebrates identified. These species are vital to local fisheries, and the area acts as a nursery for these species. The dieback also has expected flow-on effects for native animals such as the endangered Samfian thornbill, the blue-winged elegant and rock parrots. This area is so beloved and so significant, not just for the environment but of course for the community as well. And the outpouring of support and the desire for action from the community has indeed been incredible. On the 27th of January, we saw around 40 enthusiastic citizen scientists come together to help collect data on the condition of the salt marsh and the wetland. So it is worth noting that they were joined by some departmental staff. The local and broader community does care about mangroves deeply, and there is an enormous amount of local community and scientific expertise that has been ignored or downplayed or dismissed that has consistently led to decisions that have not only been too little, they have been too late. They have allowed the damage to continue. The community's understanding of the scope of the damage is growing, with many contributing their time and their resources to ensure that we have a firm understanding of the real impacts of this disaster and, of course, how it can be fixed. The Minister for Environment and Water has bemoaned the situation on radio and in the media in the past weeks, citing this as, quote, "the most complicated environmental matter I've ever come across since being Environment Minister." The most complicated environmental matter I've ever come across since being Environment Minister, from our current Minister, who, had he acted much earlier, would not be facing such a crisis at all. So that complication is by the Marshall government's own hand. It didn't need to be this way. It is common knowledge that had the government acted when the issue was first detected, the solution would have been far more simple. Rather than pumping out the brine immediately when the issue became apparent, it has been left in the salt ponds, where it is now well over 10 times saltier than seawater. It is now crystallising, which means it can't be moved through pipes and ponds as easily. The disaster did not come out of nowhere, and regardless of what the Minister says on morning radio, it was not unforeseen and did not need to become this complicated. That Minister, when confronted about how this has been allowed to happen, has simply said, quote, "I believe the sufficient environmental checks and balances were taken into account. Previous activity has been reinstated in the past and it hasn't caused issues, but this time, for whatever reason, it has resulted in hypersaline water affecting the mangroves." End quote. This statement would be laughable if it weren't so blatantly false and with devastating consequence. As far back as 2012, before the salt ponds were originally retired, a briefing report was prepared for the Adelaide and Mount Lofty Ranges NRM Board, outlining the risks and opportunities following the potential closure of the Ridley Dry Creek salt fields. Indeed, some of those risks that were identified nearly 9 years ago now include the risk potential acid sulphate soils being activated once ponds are dried out, or if there is an attempt to mine gypsum deposits from the ponds, or possible impacts from the discharge of hypersaline brines. Discharges from the salt ponds may have hypersalinity impacts on the receiving environment, and risk of long-term liability from failed ventures and insufficient remediation. In particular, I would like to highlight this section of that briefing paper. Quote, "Some aspects of the closure could result in immediate impacts, while other aspects are medium to long-term. Some of the immediate concerns include managing brine discharges to minimise high sodium impacts, stabilising drained ponds to minimise acid sulphate soil production, and present subsidence, making a decision about the ultimate rehabilitation targets for the site and determining whether the Crown wishes to allow the miner to pass some ponds over for other mining or commercial use." End quote. Now, this isn't actually, Mr President, some random report that's been hidden away over the years and then suddenly dug up again. Indeed, this is a briefing paper that has been initially requested by the government, but also a briefing paper that the DEM have uploaded onto the department's information page relating to this specific issue. And it's been there since at least late last year. Or we're assuming that's the case, given the department's website currently lists its first notification on the issue as being from the future, indeed December 2021. We assume they meant December 2020. I certainly hope that we won't still be having this same conversation at that time, at the end of this year, because then it will be far too late. Indeed, the previous updates from the website were Thursday 14th of January 2021, then the 12th of January 2021, 8th of January 2021 and the 24th of December 2021, a date obviously we have not yet reached. However, I am more hopeful for the future than the government's own website is and this report. That report, of course, as I've noted, states an updated program for environmental protection and rehabilitation for the Dry Creek saltfields was approved by the Department for Energy and Mining on the 24th of December 2020, which allows Buckland Dry Creek Limited, BDC, to reconnect Section 2 and Section 1 of the saltfields through ML6514. This approval enables BDC to move water within the Dry Creek saltfields, which is a critical step to address impacts that have occurred in Section 2 of the saltfields. This approval does not allow the recommencement of commercial salt production. If Buckland Dry Creek Limited, BDC, wish to recommence full-scale commercial salt operations, a review of the program for environmental protection and rehabilitation is required and would require subsequent government assessment and approval, and it goes on. I note that that was on the 24th of December, and I also note that the minister, both ministers involved in this, but through the words on ABC Radio of the Minister for the Environment and Water, have noted that they are so committed to this issue that they came in on Boxing Day or December 26 or thereabouts, taking time out of their holidays, Mr President, to address and have a meeting about this most urgent issue, this most urgent issue that would have not been urgent had they acted much earlier than Christmas, and indeed much earlier than they did. And while this is an environmental disaster, it risks also becoming a health issue. Indeed, the mosquito population is now exploding. As the mangroves die and vegetation recedes, this is leading to an absence of birds, fish and other wildlife that would be natural predators for that mosquito population, which has now grown very quickly. It's already quite noticeable down at the mangroves. Should anyone visit, indeed you'll need a lot of mosquito repellent, with plenty of them swarming around. And we risk seeing a growing mosquito population start to enter areas where people live, which is obviously quite undesirable and has other health risks. But despite all of this, despite there being a clear way forward suggested by the community, despite the problems and the dangers that were identified, the damage continues, and not a single drop has been transferred to the designated holding ponds. Indeed, the brine has been moved between impacted ponds, where it continues to seep out into the environment. It's doing so right now as I speak. The magnitude of this disaster is only outstripped by the ineptitude of this government in dealing with it. We see departments passing the buck from one to the other. We see ministers diminishing the scale of the damage that's been done. And we see that it's actually too late to save the mangroves and the salt marshes that we've already lost. If we act now, we can ensure that future generations will be able to enjoy those mangroves once more, but more importantly that the environment will benefit from those mangroves once more. But unlike what the minister said on radio yesterday, we aren't talking about a quantum of some 20 years, as he very optimistically noted. Indeed, we're talking about 2 or 3 generations before we even begin to restore the damage that has been done under the watch of this government.